Hey everyone, and welcome to another part of Deep Dive. The song is Song for an Eternal Child, and what we're doing here is we're looking at the melody. Now, those of you who are familiar with deep dives know that I like to categorize ways to look at stuff. And the way we're going to look at melody here is in three ways. The first way is we're going to look at it from the point of view of the parent scale. Since this song starts out in the key of E major, then that means the E major scale. The second way that we can look at stuff is as in chord tones. And what that means is that if we have a chord, say the chord is E major as the first chord here, then we can look at what the notes are against that chord. For instance, if we hit, if the chord is E major and we hit the E note, then that is the 1. If the chord is, say, an F sharp minor and we hit the F sharp, then that's again the 1. Okay. The third way of looking at stuff is notes that take us somewhere. And what that means is that the notes themselves don't sound all that pleasant, but the point of them is to take us from one place to another. Okay? We'll get to examples of that as we go along, but let's get started with the song. Okay, so we are starting off in E major, and we're starting on the 5th fret of the B string. It could be the same note can be found in a lot of different places, but let's start here. And the note is the 1. It's the same for the chord and the key, because the key is E major. Start off with the 1, then we have a 2, and then we have a 3. It's pretty straightforward, right? So let me write down the E major scale. It is E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, and D sharp. And here are the numbers of the notes. Like so. Then we go all the way here, and it's a 6 and a 5. So it's 1, 2, 3, 3, 6, 5, 2, 3, 6, 5. Makes sense? We could give these do you know these ear training syllables? Like the do, re, mi's? They look like this. So, what we could also do is sing it with these. So, do, re, mi, la, so, re, mi, la, so. Makes sense? It's the same thing. This thing right here also adds up to a major pentatonic scale, which, you guessed it, has these very notes. So the major pentatonic is the same as the major scale, except that we don't have these two notes. So this is the major pentatonic scale, and this is the major scale. Now, that's one way to look at stuff. Let's look at it from the chord perspective again. So, first up is the 1, right? Then 2, 3, then the next note on the F sharp minor. The first note of the F sharp minor is this. And yes, to the key, to the major scale, it is the 3. However, to the chord, it is the 9. Okay? I'm going to write down F sharp minor here. This is what F sharp minor looks like. And this note right here that we're hitting is this. We could also, if the melody would do this, it would be fine too, of course, everything is fine, but we could hit the flat 3 of the chord. But just see how that sounds. It's a completely different sound. That's the thing that you gotta deal with when you're writing music. How do you feel about the sound? It doesn't matter if you strictly hit the very chord tones all the time, if it doesn't sound good to you. That's the most important part. Then here is just a 3 going into 1. Again, the F sharp minor, the same note here again, the 9. Okay. Then as we are approaching a different chord, we are having a different phrase here. And that is this kind of spot. Okay, and to the E major scale, these are the notes. And notice that now that we're hitting the 4 here finally, the 4 of the key, it feels different. Because this is the first time that we're using this note. And it is the 1 of the chord. It is an A note and the chord is an A major. Then we stay in the same place using the major scale. Stretch it out a bit over here, it's fine. You can play it in various different places. Then we're getting into this territory, which again, everything is still nicely inside E major. The only thing that is not the E major here is this note, which is the final note of this section. Okay, here would be the 5, here would be the 6, so we're hitting this note. And the truth of the matter is that it doesn't matter all that much what it is to the E major scale. Yes, it's the sharp 5 or the flat 6, but the more important thing here is that it is the chord tone. And it's the chord tone of the G sharp 7 chord. Let me write down here the arpeggio. Now this would be a G sharp 7 arpeggio here. And this right here is the note that we're hitting. Now if I fill in here the rest of the E major scale, one thing that you might notice is that all of the other notes fit the E major scale nicely. The only note that doesn't is this one, right? What we could have done is we could have hit any one of these chord tones and it would have been fine. However, when we're hitting the very note that is not in the major scale, but it fits the chord perfectly, it creates this nice tension and surprise. So we're hitting the 3rd of the G sharp 7. Then we are changing the key. Again, the function of the notes remain the same. The only thing that's about to change is where we play those notes. So we go into D flat major. Okay, so next up, the very first phrase that we're hitting before the chord even changes is this right here. And what's going on here is that since we are in D flat, which is here, then this note is a 5. This note is a 6. And this note here is not in the scale, right? It would be this if it was in the scale, but that's not what we're doing. What is happening here is we have a phrase that is circling around this chord tone. And we have a note that is in the scale from up above, and a note that is not in the scale from down below, but it's a chromatic approach note. And this is something that you can do for any note you want. If the target is a kind of a strong chord tone, then you can have all kinds of different approach notes that take you to it. So what happens is we're circling around that note. Then we're hitting the 3 of the D flat, the 1, the 5, 3. So the next phrase is an arpeggio of the D flat major chord. Let's keep going. Then we get to this E flat minor 7 with the D flat in the bass, which we talked about in the harmony part. Essentially what we're doing is we're kind of staying in the D flat in a way, because the D flat in the bass doesn't change. So we're just creating some color on top of the D flat major. So you can think of it as an E flat minor 7, or you can think of it as a D flat with some extra on top. So what the melody is doing here is it's staying in the D flat major. And what is going on here is we're hitting this kind of shape. And what this is a D flat major 7, meaning that we're hitting the 1, 3, 5. Here's the 1 again. And we simply have the major 7 here. So the notes that we're hitting over here look like this. Like that. Now, and who doesn't love a D flat major 7 arpeggio, right? Okay, and after that, we're going in to the A diminished. And the first note is still in the D flat major, so we're not too worried about that. The next note is the thing that hits the chord tone of the A diminished, and it's here. So the A diminished 7 is over here. That's what it looks like, and we're hitting the chord tone there. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at this spot that we're playing right now is that everything here is still inside the D flat major scale. We're just hitting this chord tone to emphasize this chord. So everything that we do still fits this D flat major scale nicely. So there isn't a sound that offends our ear in any way. Makes sense? And we continue on up. The B flat minor is hitting there, and we are playing these notes. And the B flat minor arpeggio itself would be right here. And again, this is all right inside D flat major. Then after that, we're getting into the C minor 7 flat 5, which we looked at in the harmony part, and all we're doing is hitting the B flat note right here. They show? Yes. And it's just the flat 7 of the chord, so it's a chord tone. After that, we are hitting this note and this note. Now this one right here is not in the D flat major scale, and we can hear that it's kind of a jarring sound. Well, not jarring, but kind of a surprise sound. But again, it is a chord tone. Both of these are chord tones, and they are to the F7. Here's the F note. And what we're playing is this, which is the third and the flat 9. That's it. And the next notes are right here, which is the 1. And here is the flat 7. Then we are in the B flat minor, which is right here is the B flat note. And we're hitting the 5 and the 1. And here is the flat 3. And this is just an approach note that isn't even chromatic. It's right in the D flat major. So it all fits very nicely in the chord. Then the next thing we hit is the same 15th fret and the 13th fret. This time the function of the notes is a bit different because the chord is an E flat. So the root of E flat is right here. And what we're doing is we're hitting the 5 and the 9. And we land on this, which is the 1. Then all we are doing is we have the same notes, except that we change this one note over here. And again, the function of the notes change a little bit. This time the chord is a G flat minor. Let me write down for you what it is, what it looks like over here. You can think of it as a bar chord over here. So there would be a G flat minor grip that you might be familiar with. And we're just targeting this note, which is the minor third of the chord. Then we're targeting this note, which is the 7th, and this, which is the 6th. So what is going on here is the melody is kind of extending the harmony. Meaning that since we are hitting the major 7 and the major 6 of the chord, and as a bonus, they're also all inside the D flat major, except for the minor third. Then we're going to the D flat, and here is what a D flat major triad shape would look like. And as you can see, all we're doing is hitting these two. After that, we are hitting this and this note. So what is going on here? If we look a little further, we can see that we're also about to hit this note. So let's mark down the notes that are in the D flat major. Those are this and this. See what's going on? We're on our way from here to here. We just really using this note here. And it's a part of this bend too that's really kind of twisting our ear right here. And then all we do is we land on this note again, come down, land on this one, and this one. And all of these go right in the D flat major scale. I can write it down for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 again. D flat isn't something that we usually play every day. And it's the kind of key where when you're not used to handling it, it can be kind of confusing as to where you are on the neck. You know, what do these notes mean? But essentially they work the same way all major scales work the same way. They're just in a different spot. Then, again, we are changing keys. We're going back into E major. So the same thing is going on here again. And this time we're hanging around this spot right here. Let me write down for you this shape. So that's what we start with. Then we slide up to here. Makes sense. All of this is right inside the E major scale. Nothing's changing in that way. What is good about kind of shifting around in different positions is you get to phrase things the way you want to phrase things. If you're playing everything in a single box, then the box kind of starts to tell you how to phrase things. But if you know your stuff around the neck, then you can follow your ear more closely and get to the kind of phrasing that you want out. And that's one of the reasons that the fingerings here are kind of, they might look a bit weird, but they're here because that's the way you get those same kind of phrasing sounds as Marty does. You can play these same notes right inside a single shape. That is fine. But by doing that, you're not going to get the same kind of sound. Well, maybe you can, but it's tough. You know? And why make things tough for yourself? Okay, so after we've done that, then we get to this phrase, which is more of a standard pentatonic thing, which looks like this. So here is a major pentatonic scale shape that is very handy to know, and it's fun to play. And when we play in that shape, we get to use these hammer-ons from 9 to 11 from in a bunch of different places, right? And that's what's going on here. All we're doing is we're adding the 7 here on the phrases 2. After that comes this kind of a string skipping thing. It doesn't really matter that we're skipping strings. That's not the important part here. We're looking at the melodic content here. So what is going on is we're hitting basically E major scale on the E string and the G string. And let me write down the scale things for you here. So what we do is we kind of base our thinking around these things. Now what is going on is these also happen to hit on the chord tones nicely on every single chord, which is why we get to use some different notes over here. And we are hitting this note on the B minor 7. And what that is to the B minor 7 is a flat 3, the minor 3rd. And then we're going chromatically from here to here to here. And again, we're using that note again, but this time on the E7, it is the flat 7. So this one note here doesn't belong to the E major scale, but it's a chord tone on both of these chords. And this right here is a nice chromatic approach note between these two scalar tones. So that's it for that section. Everything is lining up nicely. Then comes this build-up thing, and this time we are over here. First phrase, they are chord tones of the B major. Then we're hitting this note 2, and that one's a flat 7. So I can write down the names like this 2 is the 1, the 5, and the flat 7. Then when the G comes, it's this note, and that is the 3rd of the G. Then we're hitting back over here, and the chord is B major again. So this time is the 3rd of that chord. And then we hit the 1. We finally hit the one of the chord and one of the key, which is E major. Then the next note is here, which is in the E major scale too, but it's also the chord tone of the G sharp 7. It's the third of the chord. No, it's not. It's the one of the chord. Oh. It's the third of the E major scale, but on the chord it's the one. Okay. Then we're shifting keys again. We're going to the D flat major again, and we have this clean section here. So let me write down the D flat major scale over here. Okay, so that's all D flat major. So we're hitting this, 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 and this. See that? We're all inside the D flat major. Nothing is changing. The bends and the strange key makes those notes kind of look weird, but all that is going on is we're hitting the D flat major scale. Now over here, things start to change a little. We're hitting the F and the A flat over here again. And the next note that we hit is this one right here. And that is not in the D flat major scale. However, the chord right there is a D diminished 7. And that one is a chord tone to it right there. So I can, let's take these markings out. And with the green color, I'll show you the D diminished 7. So we're just hitting that one. The same thing keeps going on. Again, the bends make it look weird, but we're hitting just the major scale tones. We're using this. Now we are intentionally kind of selecting different notes here that give us different flavors. For instance, we're using this and this, and we're skipping the one over there, but it's still a D flat major scale. Then next up over here, as you can see, we're still inside. And just on a side note, here reads laid back, and what it means is that rhythmically we're not as accurately on the one, but we're relaxing a little and laying back, meaning that we're hitting the notes a little bit later. That's all. And rhythmic choices like that are some of the things that Marty is very good at. It's a different kind of skill that takes some getting used to. So working on your rhythmic chops is really much worth it, because then you can do stuff like that, but it's tough at first. Okay, let's keep going. Again, D flat all the way. Again, D flat, except for these notes over there on the D diminished 7. We're hitting the D note itself. Then we're hitting the chord tone of the diminished and another chord tone of the diminished, which happens to be inside the scale. And still everything is inside except for on the A flat. We're hitting a new note, and that is the 12th fret on the D string. So it's a D note. What is going on is that the very next note is this one right here, or you can look at it over here. They're the same note. So this is a small bit of a chromatic approach note that's going up into the chord tone. We can look at it like that, or we can look at it as a small alteration on the chord, meaning that we would be hitting the flat 5 of the A flat. But that's what's creating this nice tension in there. You can really feel it. Let's keep going. The next phrase on the D flat, again, similar thing. Scale tones except for this. we're kind of going here and back up, creating this nice tension. But the core note that we're focusing on here is this right here. So a scale note from above and a chromatic tone from down below. And as we hit the 9th fret over here, this again is a chord tone of the diminished. And here is the D diminished, what it will look like so. And the rest is right inside. And we are finishing up on the 1. So it's not as complicated as one might think when you first look at stuff like this. It's most of the time a major scale, except on very key chord moments when we hit the chord tones that are not in the scale. Then comes a new section, and this time we are getting into D major. And the spot that we're kind of hanging around this time is over here. And the notes that we're playing with here are these, which are all right inside. So 3, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 5. All of the notes are hitting the major scale nicely. The one note that looks like it doesn't is the bend on the 11th fret. But what is going on is a pre-bend that is hitting this note, and we're going down into this note, but as soon as we get down, we play that note there. So there's just a little bit of this note's flavor inside there, but it's not meant to stay in there. It's just a little bit of a flavor. And then these beautiful little triplet hammer-on pull-off things. And if you look at what we're doing here, we're hitting these 2 notes. And as you can see, we're avoiding the 4. And if you remember, the difference between a pentatonic and a full-on major scale is the notes 4 and 7. So what we're kind of doing here is we're making these pentatonic major melodies inside the major scale. That's one of the things that gives it this kind of a, well, as Westerners, we can call it an Asian vibe, is that we're hitting these pentatonic notes. If we would do the same with the 3 and the 4, it wouldn't feel nearly the same. It would feel completely different. Okay, let's keep going. So everything here is still in the D major. Even that bend is just hitting the 4 of the D major. It also happens to be a chord tone of the diminished, which would be here. So every time the chord changes, usually we're hitting the chord tone. That's one of the things that really makes a strong melody. So we're still inside D major, even though the chord is a B flat, it doesn't affect the melody. We can still stay inside the D major. The only note that is different right now is this one right here, which is the 8th fret on the D string. And it looks like this. It's the chord tone of E flat. And it's the 5 of the E flat. Then as the chord changes into the next one, which is the E major, then we are hitting this note. And we have the same approach thing going on, which is this and this. Okay, so this and this are both nicely in the D major. This one isn't, but the situation is the same. Then as we go into the G and the G minor major 7, then we're hitting these notes, which is all nicely inside. See that? All these tones fit the G major nicely. I can write down what those functions are. They are a 5, a sharp 4, a 3, and a major 7. And then there's this approach note for the major 7. Then we go over here, which to the F sharp is a 3rd. Then comes one of these really spicy chords, the B7 flat 9. And we get to use some different melody tones again. B flat 7 flat 9. The root is here. And this one happens to be the flat 9. So what is going on is we are circling around this note. This note here goes right in the chord. This one, again, doesn't, but it is the same kind of movement situation that we've had a few times before. Then as we hit this note again, the chord has changed. The chord is an E minor, so this time, since these two are the notes, this is what they look like. Then we're using some chromatic stuff. So what is going on is the chord is the E minor, and this is kind of the center of our approach. And we have this note, and we have this note. And we're also using this one here. So we're creating a lot of movement that is circling around the 3rd of the chord. And then we are landing over here and here. Now this one was the real spicy chord in the harmony part that we looked at. It was the A7 flat 9, sharp 5 with the B flat in the bass. And what is going on here is we're hitting the B flat, which is the flat 9. And we're hitting the F, which is the sharp 5. That's why notes like that work here, is because the chord is such a spicy thing that the spices just fit right in. Then after all that tension, the chord is a D major again, and we're hitting the 3 of the chord. Ain't that nice? What a release after all that stuff. Then comes the solo, I guess you could call it. And the chord that was going on is the D and the D major 7. Now over there's a break in the band, so no chord is being played, but that's still a part of the context. And what is going on is we're simply playing a D major 7 arpeggio. So here's what it looks like. Here's a 1, 3. 5, 1, 3, 5. So here's a D. Now this one makes it a major 7, and here is the lowest note. So maybe you can see that we are pretty much going up this shape, doing some twirling over here. But as we approach here, we use this note here a little bit. That's fine. That's just a little approach note over there. That's pretty much the whole thing that we're doing over there in that line. Is just that the very last note that we hit is this thing right here. And that's not in the D major. What is going on is that this note is a B flat. And the chord that we're in now is a B flat. So it's kind of a surprise moment. And that's why it works, because we have a line that kind of takes us from D major into B flat. And with that, we are changing into a new key. And the key is F major. Again, all the functions remain the same. And as you can see, the key changes are a part of Marty's compositions, because a key change is a beautiful sound. Who doesn't love a good key change? Okay, so the chord is a 4 and we're hitting the 1 of the chord. I'm gonna write down kind of the spot that we're in. So here's the 1. So here's what an F major scale looks like on that part of the neck. And if we look at what's going on the melody, that is what we're very much hitting. Then comes this faster part, and it is hitting these notes here. And as you may have guessed, we're skipping on those 2 notes. And those are the very exact notes that make the difference between major and major pentatonic. So there's an F major pentatonic shape right there. That's what kind of makes those moments sound, it's a familiar sound already, I think. And it's a very kind of a recognizable pentatonic thing that we can hear in there. Or maybe you'll start to recognize it after this. Then the chord is an F major. We are landing on this note at the end of the phrase, which is the 1. And what we simply have is a little bit of a bending action moment over here. So we're taking these 2 notes and bending them both up a little bit. And this is a very common thing to do on a kind of a rock blues guitar situation. We take both of those notes, bend them up a little bit, and then land on the 1. All of that right there is, maybe you guessed it already, everything is very much inside F major. The next thing that's a little bit different is on the A major, where we are hitting these notes. And on the A major chord, these are the notes. So it's just marking down the arpeggio. So when there's a chord that is not strictly inside the F major key, all we're doing is arpeggiating the chord. Okay, so then we are on this note, and we are simply going down to here. So this one fit the A perfectly, and this one right here, we're just bending from up here, but it's the same note. And this one right here is the 5 of the B major. Then these notes over here, since we are in a B dominant kind of situation, we're going into the E major. Then we're just already hitting the notes of the E major. Let's see what the E major looks like over here. So look at that. All of it is right inside E major, except for this little thing right here. So we're just building up, going up, and even taking this little thing. So that's what's kind of creating and setting up the new key changes, that the melody is already playing the E major. So that when it hits, it feels like a real release, Okay, we are back in the main theme and back inside E major. So the melody is the same thing that was going on before, except that it's an octave higher. But the function of the notes is still the same. It's 1, 2, 3, etc. Right? Only thing that is kind of changing here is some of these fills. Like here is a fill that is let me show you what's going on. What we're doing here is we have our E note right here. We're in the key of E major, so E is the basis of our thinking right here. What is going on is we're hitting this arpeggio, and after that, we're hitting the relative minor arpeggio, the C sharp minor, which then looks like this. See that? So we have 2 different arpeggios that we're playing back to back. So stay with me on this, we're still not done. But what we're doing is we're playing the E major arpeggio, and right after that we're playing the C sharp minor arpeggio. E major and C sharp minor are related to one another. And the relative key of E major is C sharp minor, just like C major and A minor. Now, in addition to that, we're playing the E major add 9 arpeggio, which is right here. See that? We're playing that from the top down. And then as we hit this note, we're sliding right here. And now we are in this arpeggio shape. And we are adding the 9 again. See that? This is a C sharp minor add 9 arpeggio. And what is going on is we just slide down to the 1 again, which is the E major. This is the kind of arpeggio stuff that I'm making a video series on how Marty Friedman approaches arpeggios, and eventually we'll get to this stuff too. But that's what's going on. All right. We are at the home stretch. Can you believe that? Next up, it's all very much inside E major. Nothing freaky is going on. Even these fast runs. It's all E major. Some bends that may sort of blur the picture, but the notes that the bends are targeting are all inside E major. Then comes this fast section right here, and what is going on here is we have 2 chords, an E major with the B in the bass and a C diminished. Now when there's the E major, we're hitting these, and these are all inside E major. Then as the chord switches into a C diminished, I can give you an analysis on each of the notes. What they are is a 5, a sharp 5, a flat 3, and a 3. Now what is going on is that we're almost inside the C diminished, but we're just spicing it up, because that's the kind of moment where you can play almost anything. If you're playing the E major nicely and the chord that comes after, which is the C sharp minor, if you're playing those nicely, then this chord right here, you can pretty much play anything you want on it, because the chord itself is creating so much tension that as long as you resolve the tension, you can create all kinds of stuff in there as long as you resolve the tension to the next chord. I know that sounds weird, but that's kind of how this stuff works. You can try and play all kinds of stuff on top of this and see what it feels like. It's in a moment where our ear doesn't really mind, you know, because we are clearly after that going up the E major scale into this note. And this note is the 1 of the C sharp minor. Makes sense? I hope it makes sense. But the point is that there isn't some exotic scale that is going on here that only Marty knows. That's not the way it works. Marty is not a big scale guy. He's very much, as you may have noticed already, he's very much into chords and chord tones. And when the chord allows you to get crazy, then you get crazy. And it works. And this is one of those moments. All right. Let's keep going. C sharp minor. We're hitting the 1. Then comes the A minor 6 with the C in the bass. And what we're doing is we're playing this kind of a line. I'll move this note over here so that it's easier to see. Easier to understand, maybe. So, what is going on here is we have an A minor 6. This is the 1. This is the flat 3. This right here is the 5. And this is the 6. So all of the notes except for this one right here, they're just chord tones. And this one happens to be the 9. And we're just moving from here to here. These notes don't go in the E major, but again, they fit the chord perfectly. Then we are hitting the 21st fret of the B string, and that is the G sharp note, which is the 3rd of the chord and the key. And then we are staying on that note while the chord changes. And when the chord changes, then it again is a chord tone, but it's a chord tone of the diminished. The diminished is right here, okay? Then all of that B dominant 7 thing, that is all very much inside. The final note that we land on is the 23rd fret of the E string, which an octave lower looks like this right here. And this is just the major 7th of the scale, the E major scale, but to the B major chord, it is the 3. Now we're on the outro. It's the same melody kind of thing that is going on in the main theme. It's just that the chords are different. But again, they're all pretty much inside E major, and they just happen to hit different chord tones this time. The last time, the 9th fret on the 2nd bar hit the 9 of the F sharp minor, but this time we're in A major, so we're hitting the major 7 of the chord, which would then look like this. So that's the note that we're hitting, right? But after that, we're going into this C with the G in the bass. And what is going on here is the chord is borrowing from E minor. However, the melody is still sticking to E major, which is creating this tension right there, where this is what the melody is hitting, whereas this is what the chord is hitting. The chord is hitting a C, and we're hitting this note, and it's a bend. So we're going from here slowly over here, which creates a very unique sound, but it's still inside the E major all the time. It's just that the chord kind of suggests this note. Okay, but then it's time for the very last run that is on top of the E major. And what is going on here is we could have just a run on the E major scale. However, that is not what we're doing. What we're actually doing this time is we're not playing the major scale. We are using the flat 7, which is, I can mark it down over here. It will look like that. And what this scale is the Mixolydian. So as you can see, we're not talking that much about scales over here, but here is a pretty clear kind of a scalar moment, in that I'm not saying that this is what Marty thinks when he writes stuff like this, but I'm saying that this is what he hears. The chord is an E major, and he wants a specific sound to it. And the sound that he's looking for has a flat 7 in it. It's a really different sound and feel from a major scale. If we played this same phrase, but using the major scale, it would sound and feel a lot different. But this creates a different kind of tranquility, I would say. And the very last note that we hit is the 3rd. And there are some layered guitars there, but they're all hitting chord tones. But yeah, that's it for the melody of Song for an Eternal Child. I hope you enjoyed that. I sure did. It's an amazing journey, this whole song. And there's still a lot to go over in the technique part. But I hope you learned something. If you want to support what I do, you can find me on Patreon. I have more transcriptions in there and more lessons. Thanks. Bye.